I am really excited to have somebody on the show today. All of our guests are new to the show. This is a fairly new show. We're just a little over 2.5 months old, but there is somebody who is just prolific on the Iran file. Going to talk to us, update us on the latest, what is happening with Iran. I know you guys probably listen to me talk about Israel and Iran every Sunday. Maybe you think I'm a little obsessed with it, but I think it is one of the most important national security challenges. So we now have a former ambassador at the United Nations for management. Ambassador Mark Wallace is joining the Morgan Ortagus Show. He is now the CEO of an organization called UANI, that is United Against a Nuclear Iran. So welcome for the first time to the Morgan Ortagus Show, Ambassador Mark Wallace. Good morning, Ambassador.
Morgan, great to talk to you, and congrats on the show. You've taken the Sunday news and foreign policy world by storm, so I'm really happy to be on the show. And
that's so nice.
On everything you're doing. I really mean it. Everyone is talking about your command focus on all these issues, and it's really nice to have somebody doing that. And I'm delighted to be on the show. It's an honor. So thank you.
Well, I'm just so grateful to Sirius. People said, that no one's going to want to listen to foreign policy for 2 hours. And I said, yes, they will, because we'll make it relevant, we'll make it interesting, and we'll explain to everybody why all these things actually matter to us. How does it affect us? Now, I want you to, our listeners probably have not heard about UANI, so you got to tell them a little bit about it. But something that I think is incredibly important, just as a fundamental bottom line when we start talking about Iran, your organization is United Against a Nuclear Iran, and Iran is actually, Ambassador Mark Wallace, closer than it has ever been to achieving a nuclear weapon. Walk us through it, sir.
Sure. So thank you again. So we formed United Against Nuclear Iran in 2008. We've been on the scene for a very long time. I guess we've been on the scene so focused on it for a long time that we have gotten very good at it. We have all the world's best experts. And what we do is we have the best policy experts. So what we do is engage and pursue economic and a type of cyber warfare against the Iranian regime. So we've literally run 10,000 or so individual campaigns against companies, every company that does business in or with Iran, every individual, every trade delegation, countries. We track each and every Iranian oil tanker that comes out smuggling Iranian oil. We try to deflag it, take its insurance away. We try to seize it. We work with the United States government. It's been reported to seize Iranian smuggling oil tankers because we are the best of the business at tracking these tankers. And then what we try to do is we try to call the regime out in every which way and really dominate X and the policy space in a bipartisan way to call out Iran for its incredibly malign activities that really the purpose of your show, as you said, is to show why these issues are so important. In my opinion, and you and I have talked about this before, all roads lead to Tehran in terms of the problems that are confronting the Middle East, whether it's the horrible Hamas attacks of 10/7, Hezbollah in Beirut, the Houthis in the Red Sea, the attacks on American forces in Syria, Iraq. All roads lead to Tehran. And I think that's why your command focus on it and the attention that I hope it's getting because of that is really important, because sometimes we get distracted in the United States with our own problems and we don't realize these global problems can easily come home to us, and they already are.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One of the things that in your organization, thank you for laying it out for us, UANI does so much work. One of the things that you just did is you wrote a letter calling on the State Department to rescind the visa for Iran's Vice President for Women and Family Affairs. Why does that matter? I guess, and if you're just sitting here listening, as you just laid out, Iran's a bad actor. That they supply the weapons that just killed 3 American service members in Jordan. We had 2 Navy SEALs that died on a mission. All of this tumultuous, all of this stuff happening in the Middle East is directly from Iran. Their hand is behind it all. And, listen, thank God that our U.S. Navy ships and the sailors on it are so accurate at shooting down these Iranian weapons from the Houthis. And you just pray that they never miss, right? Because all it takes is one time. So when Americans are listening to this, listening to you and I talk, Ambassador Wallace, you might look at it and go, well, why in the world does Iran's Vice President for Women and Family Affairs, which seems like a joke in and of itself, that title, why would they have a visa to the United States?
Well, I think it reflects a failed policy. Right now, I think our administration is so concerned about having any escalation, if you will, with Iran, that it's emboldening Iran by refusing to take basic steps to prevent greater conflict. So when you have the ridiculous proposition that some Iranian woman activist is coming to the UN, how about giving visas to all the women whose eyes have been literally put out by the IRGC because they are protesting their obligation to wear the mandatory hijab or protesting against the government. But the administration, I think, is very concerned about upsetting the apple cart with Iran. Even the policy towards Iran writ large in the region, the answer was if any Americans died or were killed by Iranian attacks, there would be some sort of United States response. Well, there were over 160 attacks in the region before, tragically, 3 of our soldiers were killed in Tower 22 in an outpost in Jordan. And then we responded, I think, probably in too much of a tepid manner. And you're right. How is the expectation that our Navy is expected to shoot down every missile, and only, God forbid, if one gets through, would the United States respond decisively? I think we have to send a clear message to Iran that we will discourage you with overwhelming force strategically before you engage in such an attack that will result in the massive loss of life of Americans abroad. And I think that's why right now the policy is a little bit upside down in the administration. And I'm worried about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just wild to me. If we sort of peel back the onion and get to the heart of this issue, the Biden administration, when they came in 2021, I think that they basically, Ambassador Wallace, just wanted to ignore the last 4 years of the Trump administration. They couldn't even say the phrase Abraham Accords, right? These are peace deals. This is something to be happy about. Doesn't matter who gets a peace deal. You want to be able to talk about those peace deals, and it costs nothing for the United States to get those. So, they couldn't say the word Abraham Accords, and then they immediately sought to change the relationship that the U.S. had with Iran. And the relationship meaning the maximum economic pressure campaign that I was a part of, that I probably talked about on a daily basis for almost 2 years at the Trump State Department. And, I felt like we gave them maximum leverage, right? We had taken out Qasem Soleimani. We had their economy on the ropes. And I was like, listen, guys, we have given you maximum leverage. And they spent 3 years just squandering that leverage, not enforcing sanctions, Iran seeing $80 to $90 billion effectively in sanctions relief because they were able to sell their oil and their energy exports. And then what happens? They resupply the Houthis, they resupply Hamas, they resupply Hezbollah. And it's wild to me that you have the nightmare scenario that none of us said we wanted after 9/11, Ambassador Wallace, which is a terrorist organization with ballistic missiles, suicide drones, and sophisticated weaponry going after U.S. service members. I mean, I thought this was the whole point of the war on terror, was to make sure terror groups did not have these capabilities, right? You're not talking about people just, blowing themselves up, suicide bombers in Afghanistan. You're talking about freaking ballistic missiles in the hands of a terrorist group. So I just wonder, when you look at this, how can any sane, rational person, whether you're in foreign policy or not, right? How can you look at this and think that this is good policy that this administration has pursued towards Iran? I know that's a loaded question, but Ambassador Wallace, it's just wild to me.
Well, you're right. Look, we were United Against Nuclear Iran in our effort. We had always been big sponsors of maximum pressure, and we were thrilled when the Trump administration adopted maximum pressure, and you talked about it every day, because we thought maximum pressure was an essential element of a sane policy against Iran. Look, we politicize everything in the United States, but at the end of the day, there are only a few things you can do to confront Iran, and they're serious things. Economic pressure, you can engage in military planning, you can engage in some form of diplomacy, and some form of cyber operations where you try to degrade their abilities. Those are the only 4 things you can reasonably do to degrade and prevent Iran from engaging in its malign activities. And for whatever reason, that's become politicized. And a smart policy would include all of those. But since the time of this administration, notwithstanding some of the things that they've done, they have, you see the oil exports have flown to nearly 2.5 million barrels a day from a low of 400,000 barrels at the time of your administration that you worked in. I think that's a tragedy because that's the money that they generate. They really generate no other large dollars to the general revenue budget that they use to support their proxies across the region. And all of that mischief, without that money, without the incredible oil smuggling that's taking place right now, Iran would not have the financial ability to support these proxies. Right now, as we speak, Morgan, there are over 300 vessels smuggling Iranian oil on the high seas. I can give you the GPS coordinates of every single one of them. I can give you the name of the vessel, the flag of the vessel, who insures it, and its registry. If an NGO in the United States can do that, I think we can do better as a country and with our allies to stop that oil smuggling. It shouldn't just be up to us to identify and seize these vessels once in a while with the government. We can do much better. And without that money, without that oil, there are no ballistic missiles. There are no funds flowing to Hamas and Hezbollah. And it's a significant failure, in my opinion.
You know, so that's a great transition because we're talking about the terrorism that Iran sponsors throughout the Middle East, and they are the ones pursuing chaos, pursuing terror, pursuing an unsteady and unstable Middle East, to put it mildly. And just this week, actually, the Biden administration decided not to go after Iran, but to go after more West Bank outposts and 3 more Israeli settlers. They claim these Israeli settlers, are obstacles to peace. They definitely at times have tougher words for our ally, for our friend Israel, than they do for our enemy, Iran, by the way, who's behind the active killing and targeting of U.S. service members. What's your view on this new tough stance that's being taken by the administration against Israel, but specifically that they're doing this at a time whenever Israel is at war with a U.S. designated foreign terrorist organization?
Well, I think it reflects a real weakness in our policy. Look, I served in the Bush administration long ago now, and there was a lot of criticisms for the President Bush's foreign policy. Some justified, some not, in my opinion. But I will tell you, when Iran trains paragliders to invade, terrorists to attack Israel, when their IRGC forces are empowering militias to kill Americans, our response was to attack Iraq and Syria. We have an allergy and a fear that if somehow, God forbid, we would actually strategically attack and strike where these attacks are coming from, which are IRGC. There's a multitude of IRGC targets in Iran, but we won't do that. We are too afraid to touch that. But at the same time, we are getting more and more vocal about criticizing Israeli policy. I saw an interview on CNN the other day, and there was this poor woman that was protesting, desperately wanted her child back, her family back, and the reporter asked her what about all the people that were suffering in Gaza? And you could see she was pained by that. I don't think anybody wants any other suffering, but if it was any of our family members, we would be doing everything we could to get those family members back. And it seems like the administration has lost touch with that, and the sensibility of the Israeli people is fully aligned, and the scar that is there as their people are suffer as hostages there. I think there's real confusion amongst our allies of why we're trying to find moral equivalence when Hamas has to be eradicated. General Petraeus, who is very renowned for his counterinsurgency operations in Iraq, he even came out and said there can be no possibility that Israel isn't allowed to defeat and destroy Hamas's brigades and then engage in a counterinsurgency. Well, there's at least 6 Hamas brigades still in existence in the southern part of Gaza, and our feigned righteousness to protect the people when these terrorist brigades are there is entirely misplaced.
Well, they're giving us the hooks, but thank you so much, Ambassador Mark Wallace, CEO of UANI, United Against a Nuclear Iran. Thank you for coming on the Morgan Ortagus Show. I hope you will be back soon. Let's go to a commercial break, and up next, we have Senator Pete Ricketts from Nebraska.